All right, everybody, welcome for joining us today. We're going to be talking about perfecting the video interview, coming to you from Engage to Excel, Recruitment Solutions, and Talent Board. My name is Kevin Grossman. I'm the president of Talent Board, and we want to welcome you all. Before we introduce our main speaker, I wanted to talk a little bit about the webinar and what to expect through this entire journey that you're going to have with us today over the next 45 minutes to an hour. We're going to record this. We're going to send this recording out to you tomorrow, as well as the slides. And we will be taking questions later on at the end of the webinar. So you can submit those through either the Q&A part of the Zoom console for those familiar with Zoom, and you can find it just as Q&A, or through the chat function as well. And we've got a team that's on the other side that's going to help monitor those. So again, if you have questions about technical issues or the recording or the slides, again, we're going to provide those to you tomorrow. So without further ado, as they say in the big leagues, right, Darren? I want to introduce Darren Findley, who is the president of Engage to Excel Recruitment Solutions. And Darren, I'm going to step out of the way now and turn this thing over to you. This is your show now.
All right, Kevin. Thanks a lot. Really excited to be here today. This is what I really look like in the non-professional view and the quarantine stay-at-home Darren Findley. And it's just been a unique experience as we kind of participate in the social distancing and really physical distancing exercise as we all try to battle the coronavirus kind of across the country. And so I'll start out saying that I'm just thankful that everybody that's joined today. I'm thankful and that, hope that your family is safe and your friends are safe, and we continue to pray for the best for all of them as we go into the next several weeks, so we can hopefully begin to see this thing kind of subside and we can get back to a new normal. But I do say it's a new normal, and we'll talk a little bit about that today as we go into the conversation. But I've interviewed in so many strange locations and situations and types like that, and I've bombed a lot of them, and I've nailed a few of them, but I've learned a lot along the way, and I really learned mostly from my fantastic team. So really kudos to them. We've got about 100 recruiters on our team that are all virtual, and they sit all around the country, and they spend all day, every day, conducting interviews and video interviews. So they're really the experts when it comes to this video interviewing thing. I have worked remote for over 20 years now, and the fact that I've traveled 80% of that time doesn't make me a work-from-home expert. I'll just kind of say there's my caveat right there. But I think there's some things we can share today that will help you, and I'd be remiss if I just didn't say that a nod to what we're going to be doing from our partnership with the Talent Board is going to be around the candidate experience. So just want you to kind of think about things from their lens and their point of view, as well as preparing yourself to be ready for some of the things you're going to encounter when it comes to doing video interviews. So there's some challenges, obviously. There's been a dramatic shift, over the last couple of weeks as we begin to this new world that we're in. And the shift occurred both for employees and employers, and prospective employees as well. So we've all had to make some rapid adjustments, and some of those adjustments have been really easy. Some of them have not been as easy, and we need to make sure we just kind of keep those things in mind as we go into these challenges. And this whole work from home challenge in many cases as well. Our processes have to be updated and changed. Some of the technology issues that we're still having today. I mean, this morning I was following my own advice and trying to go through a dry run, and everything locked up. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed that this is going to be okay today. I've gotten that out of the way, but in the world of technology from home and connectivity and things like that, there are going to be technology issues that exist, and then there are interruptions that occur. And so I fully expect that when Amazon or FedEx shows up probably halfway through this presentation, that my dog is going to make an announcement that everyone's going to hear. And so I apologize in advance that he is the guard dog, and he's just letting me know that somebody's here. That's another package in play. And then at the end of the day, there's a lot of tough decisions we have to make around some of the challenges that we have. So as leaders, we're trying to balance out our humanity, our financial incomes, and financial accountabilities as well. And we may have to pivot in some of our hiring methodology. We may have to pivot in some of our product launches as an organization, and even some of our delivery methodology. So those are some of the challenges that we can kind of find ourselves in right now as we go forward. But there's definitely a need that's out there, and there's a need to find additional workers in many cases, and there's a need to think through how you can bring those workers on There's a need to continue to pipeline candidates along the way as well. So as we talk about some of these things we'll cover today, we want to keep in mind that part of it's to cover the immediate needs that we have today. Part of it is to have you just think differently about how you're going to engage candidates in the near future and maybe even the longer term future. And the way we still screen and recruit, we're still going to be interviewing. We may handle these parts a little bit differently. So whether you text your candidates or whether you spend time on chatbots or on chatting with them individually, there's going to be a new way to engage candidates. But today, what we're going to talk about really is the video interview. And so as we enter again this brave new world with a lot of different challenges, just remember, video interviewing is really not new, and it's been around for a long time. And I can remember doing video interviews, 10 years ago and piloting some of those programs. But thanks to this guy right here, he has absolutely helped us out. And he has helped us understand that you don't have to be perfect in every single interview that you do. And so we're not the first ones that are going to have a struggle with it. And so this is Professor Robert Kelly, kind of nicknamed by the BBC as BBC Dad. And the reason he's a BBC Dad is that he was doing an interview live on television. You guys may or may not remember him, but the first child there in the yellow kind of, meanders in, and she's so happy to be in there with Dad and just kind of walking around, and he stays laser focused really on his interview. And then a few minutes later, the toddler and the roller comes in the room as well. And the little girl comes up and tries like, hey, Dad, what's going on? And he, again, just stays laser focused, on the interview that he was doing, and kind of with one arm begins to kind of move her back a little bit. All done with such grace and poise and calm demeanor that I could have never pulled off. It's kind of funny. A few minutes into that, I think his wife comes in and tries to drag them all out with a little bit less calmness and demeanor. But I think when you think about the world that we're in today, that whether it's you as an interviewer or the candidate, we're going to have these interruptions that we need to learn how to deal with. And so whether it's a dog barking or alarm going off or visitors at your front door, I think it's the fact that we're going to be cognizant around, those things is really going to be kind of important as we go down the road. And so there's been hundreds, if not thousands, of new cases of individuals doing video interviews or video time on the screen. And I'm not an influencer. I know some influencers that are out there that are way more qualified to understand some things that we're going to talk about today. And of course, you'll see on the screen there's a lot of different people that are there. And I hate to disappoint you, but Big Bird's not going to be here today, unfortunately. But there is a lesson that Big Bird can teach us as we talk about some of these individuals and some of the approach that they've made across the video interviewing plane. So as you approach video interviewing with confidence, you got to understand what's the point of it, right? And understand that there's a couple of things you can do to balance that approach to get your ultimate objective accomplished, which really is capturing all the information that you need, understand the individual's competencies, their experience and their skills, so you can make the best choice possible for bringing in top talent for you. So at the end of the day, with all the swirl and all the challenges that we have to remember that a strong process is going to help you out from a selection standpoint. You've still got to assess those skills, but at the end of the day, it's really most important that we're interviewing for selection and keeping focused on the reason why we're doing these video interviews. And many times that's hard to do. So we've kind of assembled 7 tips. And these tips are brought around from our organization and some others as well. And we'll hit on each one of these 7 tips that we have. And then at the end, here in just a few minutes, we'll spend some time doing some Q&A. And hopefully this will kind of help you be prepared to really nail and navigate the new world. Maybe for some of you, the old world for some others, and thinking a little bit differently about the interview process. So number 1 really is around just choosing a technology platform. And so it can be a lot of different things. There's some companies out there that have interview technology platforms like HireVue and others. And there's also companies like Zoom and WebEx and Skype that you can also use. So you need to check with your technology department and find out which is the most preferred platform to use. And then use that platform, integrate that platform, practice with that platform so that you know how to actually technically use it when you get started. And also it's important to know that when you're doing that, get your candidates ready to also use that platform. So we'll talk about setting expectations and another number down the road, but having that information out to the candidates is really going to be crucial. The other thing you think about is make sure you have a good internet connection. And so we've kind of waffled back and forth sometimes. Our internet's really strong here, and sometimes for some reason it's just not that strong. So sometimes I have to go and actually use my phone and use a hotspot to get that connectivity. But again, thinking about it in advance and practicing doing the dry run is going to help you with that. And worst case scenario, you can always go back to that old-fashioned thing called a telephone interview. You actually just use the phone only and no video at all. Imagine that, going so far back in time. But you can use the phone to do an interview. So don't get stressed about it if it doesn't work. Have your platform in place. And the second is brought to you by Lady Gaga HR. And so I don't know if any of you guys saw this on Jimmy Fallon, when she made the announcement around the concert this past Sunday. But there was some interesting commentary, and a lot of the pictures that you'll see and that I showed you in the previous 2 slides as well are from a segment that was done on this Sunday morning with Mo Rocca. If you guys ever watched that CBS program on Sunday mornings, it's a wide variety of things that are common, that are segments that are done. But it was just really interesting on this particular segment. And they used Lady Gaga as an example. And so when you look at this, I call this HR Lady Gaga because she looks like one of us. This is not the normal Lady Gaga that I've seen out there. She got a turtleneck on, she got a jacket, and she looks like any good HR professional would be in doing a video interview. And so when you think about it, what image does she set in this picture? And what image are you going to be setting? And what information are you going to be giving to your candidates that are out there? And so this may be the first time any of your candidates have experienced a video interview. So take time to explain the process. Make sure they understand how to download the technology that we talked about in number 1. Make sure they understand what audio or video capabilities are going to be used during the conversation, so they're ready for that up front. And then make sure they know how to get on the platform. And so as in any normal interview, as you get started, assuming that all the connectivity works great, the video is working great, the audio is working well, make sure you think about how to set the expectations for the interview just like you would in a normal face-to-face interview. How long is it going to take? What kind of questions are you going to ask? Are you going to be taking notes? Are you going to be typing? I want to show you something. I cannot take notes on my laptop because where my camera is on my laptop. If I begin to type, this is what I'm typing on my keyboard. I have to totally reframe my view, and where the camera is actually situated in the laptop is right down by the keyboard. Can't tell you how many times I move my desk up and down, side to side, step back, move forward, trying to get this camera angle somewhat normal because of where it's set on my actual laptop. So again, thinking about those expectations are really going to be important. Make sure the candidate also understands that you're going to be taking notes. If there's clicking on the keyboards that are going on, make sure you explain that. If you get your head down and you're writing out your notes, let them know that in advance. So they just don't wonder why they're seeing the top of your head and why it got gray, which mine did. The last time maybe they interviewed with you, it wasn't that way. So, and also let them know too that you'll pause sometimes to get caught up on your note taking. And then also there'll be an opportunity for them to ask questions along the way as well. So they're not just wondering what's going to happen next. So many times because of the new environment in video and audio, they're not really sure how they should behave and what's next for them. And they're worried maybe about how they look only. And so make sure you set those expectations really for those candidates when you get started to kind of help them be a little bit more at ease. Number 3 is this. It's kind of along the same line of the technology, right? Keep the candidate technology constraints in mind, the restraints that they might have. Remember, in this time of self-isolation, we're finding that many people actually have the desire to connect, via video. And, last Sunday, I'll tell you a story. Last Sunday, my family decided to do an impromptu video family reunion. And I was skeptical. I mean, it was Easter Sunday. No one's traveled for a while. No one's had a chance to get together. So we used the free version of Zoom. We had a 30, 45-minute time slot. And as expected, there were issues. And so as those issues came along, we spent probably 20 to 25 minutes helping our other family members get connected. And it really was quite hilarious to see my great uncle, my great aunt trying to navigate, Zoom and navigate the world of video and where the video camera was pointing up their nose or outside, or I don't know what was going on with some of those videos, but it really just kind of made me much more cognizant of what was going on with the technology constraints that a lot of people just may have today. So you got to keep that in mind. But once everybody got on, it was really just kind of fun to connect and laugh and joke and kind of share stories of things that have been happening the last few weeks. And so make sure you've got those icebreakers in place again, as well as you would a normal interview, to get the candidate at ease and just understand what kind of technology constraints might be in mind. And again, like I said before, you may have to pivot and use the old-fashioned technology of a telephone if for some reason it's not working. And then number 4, think about your presentation on screen. There's only one person that has enough international fame and enough credibility and instant recognizability, I guess, than Big Bird, right? And Big Bird is kind of the only person that can pull off a totally white background, and so to know who he is and how he operates. But when you think about it, many pictures we're seeing today, and I captured them from this CBS News that we did early on. I just found it so interesting that, and really relevant for our presentation today, you consider, what you're going to wear as your image on the screen. So when you're doing your interview, you're still projecting your employment brand that's out there. So do you have a very conservative kind of an employment environment? Do you have a very relaxed employment environment? And whatever message that you have for that is going to be depicted in the way you dress. And so you want to make sure you're not sitting in front of some busy wallpaper. Reese Witherspoon did a segment, and 90% of the responses were about her wallpaper and the fabric on her chair, as opposed to what she was actually reading that's out there. So that is partially because there's a lot of people that have opinions out there in social media, but partially because there's a lot of conflict there on the screen. I struggle with this picture behind me today. It's a bunch of buffaloes walking across a stream. Is that the right thing to have in a background? And because I've traveled so much the last 10, 20 years, I've never really thought about what does the background say about me and about the environment that I'm in, what kind of projection that does. Is it better to have an Engage to Excel sign, or maybe our trifecta, which is part of our culture, back behind me? And so the longer we stay home, quite honestly, I'll probably be switching some of that out to more appropriately reflect the values that we have as an organization, because now this has become really part of who I am and who we are as a business and as a part of our employment brand. And so I won't spend a ton of time talking about that, but I want to show you kind of on the next screen, when you think about some of those same things. The backgrounds in the offices say, a lot about a lot of different people. And one of the examples in this segment was Bernie Sanders. He's in the bottom right there for you. And they're saying, look, what does this say about Bernie Sanders? And so I think very thoughtfully, he has put together his background, right? He's got a picture of family, he's got a picture of his hometown, and he's got a chess set. Now, is Bernie back there playing chess all day? What's up with that? Or is the message that he's trying to send one that, hey, I'm very strategic in what I'm doing, and I'm thinking about that? And so it's just a great example of what's going on. And then you see Brad Paisley up in the top right as well, next to Ryan Reynolds. And Brad was in his barn playing the guitar in the back of his pickup truck. And so that told you that he was home, he was kind of by himself, but that's where he was relaxed, and that kind of set apart his image from maybe someone else. And then you got Jim there in the top middle. He's a comedian, and I don't know a lot about the stuff that he does from a comedian standpoint. I've seen a few of his things that I think are funny, but the comments that the commentator at CBS made is that, he's great at communication, but what's up with those chandeliers? And so, again, what's the kind of background you want to have there, overall? And then Sir Anthony Hopkins in the top left, he's got his cat with him. So I don't recommend that you have your dog or your cat in your lap when you're doing your interview. It may be a little distracting not only for you, but also the interviewee. But if that's part of your culture and you want to say, I've got my dog sitting here next to me, I think that's perfectly fine as well. So just think through, kind of what's going on. And for a discussion for another day, and Kevin, you and I will need to kind of talk about this, is that when you think about employment branding and you think about work-life balance, I just wonder what's going to happen as we continue to stay quarantined or stay-at-home orders around. We don't really have this work-life balance anymore. We absolutely have a work-life blend. And so you see Tom Hanks, he is in his kitchen when he hosted Saturday Night Live just a week or so ago. So talk about work-life blend. So now we're actually in his home now, in his kitchen, as we begin to understand who he is and listen to his commentary and you see the other guys from Saturday Night Live above them, and two very different backgrounds for them. One in an office, and then one had more of a sports kind of theme back there with Michael Che. So it really is different. And of course, we talked about Lady Gaga early on. Her HR office just kind of cracks me up, right? Because it's so professional. But again, won't spend a lot of time on that soapbox, but just know that I think we're going to see more and more things and surroundings be impacted by us all being at home much longer. So talking about Jim, as I mentioned him a little bit earlier, what he does really well is be natural. And I think a lot of times because maybe you're sitting in a room by yourself, you're just looking at a screen, and maybe like for me today, the only person I can see on the screen is Ron, Melissa, and Kevin, and me. So I don't get to see the rest of you. So it's kind of hard to know how to interact. But again, being natural is really going to be critical and really be important. And what Jim does really well, he talks through the computer. And I have to kind of think about that too, because my eyes will wander. I'll look up while I'm talking outside because I don't think that there's no one looking back at me. So it's a little strange sometimes to think about and remain focused. I've got to look back at the camera on the screen because I've got to talk through that screen to hopefully reach each and every one of you. So it already feels strange, but make sure that you do practice that, and rather than looking down or to the side. And again, I admit that it's really hard to do. I've got notes I'm looking at the same time, but at the end of the day, you'll want to watch facial expressions of your candidates, and you'll want to see them nod, affirmation. If they turn their head to the side and kind of, furrow their brow a little bit, do they not understand the question? So again, it's really important to not only talk through the camera, listen back through the things that are coming up, but also take the visual cues that you're seeing in the video as well. So, some of the key differences in conducting an interview by video versus face-to-face in our office, for example, is this whole camera positioning that I talked about. And so, you need to make sure you're in a quiet place. If you have an office that's in the front of the house by the front door, probably not a good move, especially with things being delivered more and more now these days. But think about a quiet place you can conduct the interview, or hopefully are not going to be interrupted. Try to be free from other noise that's going on in the house. And for those of you that are homeschooling, I can't imagine, what it's like having your kids around all during the day asking questions. But as an interviewer, that's going to happen. And you may as well get prepared for it now and be able to let that part kind of roll off, because people are still trying to figure out how that's going to work. But practice looking at the camera, record yourself in advance if you can, and just be really prepared to create a great experience, for those candidates overall. And just be comfortable communicating and helping them get comfortable communicating back and forth. And I like this guy because these different levels, and I've moved my camera around about 12 or 13 times today to try to find the right one. I'm not sure this is really the right one still, but I'll keep working on it and keep practicing on it overall. And then last but not least, just really consider the total candidate experience. The interview is just one element of that candidate experience, and you want to make sure that they feel comfortable throughout the entire process, and they're able to walk away with a positive impression of your organization. And with this, you got to keep in mind you still want to follow up like you would have. Candidates should follow up with thank yous. You should follow up with thank yous as well. Let them know what they can expect as the next step. Let them know what the timeline looks like, and just be transparent, with them. If it's going to move really fast because you have an urgent need based on the work being essential, let them know. If it's going to be a while before you guys get ramped back up again, let them know that as well. And just being transparent with candidates, I think, is going to be really important as we start to come out of this, because nobody really knows the pace that we're going to come out of this whole coronavirus situation that we're in today. But again, having that transparency, setting those expectations, keeping the entire experience, kind of in your preview is going to be really important as you guys go through. So just think about some takeaways, that you guys can take from today. The future of work is there's going to be remote work, and we think there's going to be more than there's been in the past, because now people have been able to do it successfully that might not have done it before. And more importantly, it's going to be necessary for our health and our safety. And this eventually could be a very significant part of our life and of our work. I think we'll see a blended model, and that comes up. And I think companies will incorporate more of these opportunities probably more frequently. But just the thought of having the ability that we can do it now is going to be a game changer in the world of recruiting and interviewing and interacting with candidates, unlike we've ever seen before in the past. So polish up on your tech skills, polish up on your interview skills, and now's the perfect time to do that. And don't be afraid just to practice. And as time-consuming as it is, and as corny as it may sound, it made me feel a lot better knowing the struggles I was going to have, knowing that I couldn't get the perfect position, knowing that the camera angle wasn't what I really wanted it to be. But you know what? Time came. I had to give it up, and I had to actually get on the video with you guys today. So, but the practice helped, and the thinking about it in advance absolutely did help me prepare for what we're going to talk about today. So, at the end of the day, we talked about 7 different things, and 7 things that we can do to help you be the best video interviewer you can, and actually create a really great experience for your candidates. So, think about these 7 one more time. Choosing the right platform so that you know how to use the technology. Set the expectations so the candidate, let them know what's going to happen. Although it's a video interview, it might be different, it might be new. Set those expectations with the candidates. Let them know how to log on. Let them know that you're going to do audio and video. And then also think about your presentation screen and what's behind you and how the lighting makes a big impact. So as an example, if I open up that and my camera angle is like this, then you can't see me anymore, right? So think about what your screen presentation looks like. Think about the impact that it has on the ability for someone to see you on the screen. And keep that candidate's technology constraints in mind as well. And they may be sitting right in front of an open window when you log in. You may not be able to see them at all. Just tell them, can you turn to the side? Can you pull the shade? I can't really see you. So let's just kind of work through that. It's all okay. And then number 4 is just be as natural as possible and continue to think about talking through the screen, interact with that individual. The more you do it, the easier it's going to be. If you've not done it a lot, number 6, do a dry run. Practice a little bit. Practice will make perfect. You'll get better at it every time you do it. And then number 7, just consider the total candidate experience. Make sure you're setting those expectations, following up the way you think you should follow up, and keeping your processes in place today. And so I just really want to say thank you to everyone for jumping on today. I know I talked really, really fast as I look up at the clock now and see that I basically hammered through this in about 30 minutes. So I love to spend some time taking some questions or just kind of talking about some things that have worked and things that haven't worked. So Kevin, if you've got questions you can see there, would love to take some of those.
Darren, we are going to take some questions. I've got a couple I wanted to ask you first. So you referenced that how to prep on the interviewer side and the companies and what they should do and prepare. And you also referenced you should also do a little bit of coaching with your candidates. Do you recommend then that maybe there's more of a kind of a prep sheet that's put together that's sent to the candidates ahead of time in an email as a PDF? Just some tips of what they need to prep for before the interview?
Absolutely, Kevin. So when you think about these candidates that may have never done this before, so not only having instructions ready to go for those candidates, but also having a prep sheet of things they can think about, I think it's just really going to be important to make sure that they can be prepared.
And yeah, it looks like you stopped sharing then, Darren. You can put it back up.
Yeah, I didn't mean to. So again,
that's all right.
Technology.
Well, while you're getting that back up, another question for you then. So some applications, you can blur your background, right? And you were talking about background and what's distracting and what maybe is not. What about virtual backgrounds then? Meaning, should it be something that's very nondescript, that's very like kind of downplay, more of an office setting, not anything? I mean, especially in an interview context, you don't want to have up like spring break beach scene behind you, right? I mean, so what do you recommend there about the virtual backgrounds?
Yeah, so it's a really good point. So unless you're recruiting for lifeguards at the beach, I wouldn't have the spring break beach background, there in place. So I think there are some things that you can do, and when you think about, customizing that background to your organization and the employment brand that you want to have, it's going to be really important. And again, in all honesty, I've not used a lot of the virtual backgrounds yet, but I do think more and more will be using those and customizing those to the experience that we want to make sure that the candidate has. Again, your values, your cultural statements are going to be really important because it continues to validate who you are as an organization. So that candidate can also make a decision on, is this a good match for me, while you're also doing the interview to decide if they're a good match for you.
Exactly. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Ron, what other questions do we have right now?
We have had a couple more questions come in. So great job to Darren. And some people were liking your suggestion, Kevin, about the checklist, and they thought that was a great idea. Do you by chance have a prep sheet for candidates, Darren, or an example or anything along those lines?
We do, as a matter of fact, Ron. So great question. And we'll send that out when we send out the recording of the video today. So everyone will have that with them as well.
No, great. Thank you for sharing that. Because that's one of the things, Darren, and again, I can't emphasize it enough, but whether it's an in-person interview, a video interview, a phone screen, whatever the case is, prepping the candidates, not prepping them so that they can ace the interview, but just prepping them ahead of time of what expectations they should be thinking about, of how it's going to work, who they're going to be talking with, and then a prep sheet about conducting a good video interview, and what they should be doing in the background, et cetera. I think it's really important. That goes a long way with improving candidate experience too. Actually, you get much more high positive ratings, and there's a higher level of perceived fairness when you're engaging me like that. Again, just looking out for me, like, these are the things you need to plan for in order to show your best self during the interview, right?
Yep. Also positions a recruiter as an advocate of the candidate as well, right? Sure. So the hiring manager still makes the decision, but recruiters can actually have a big impact on the candidate's perception of the organization and the recruiter by giving them that help.
Right. And that's important because, again, at the end of the day, on the average, only one person is getting that job too. So what else, Ron?
Awesome. Thank you, guys. So Darren, thank you for all the insights in today's presentation. Someone was wondering whether you have some more insights about psychological bias or rating assessment biases to share, and what are the sources for the biggest misjudgment from your experience?
Those are good questions. Those are deep questions, right? Yeah. So while I'm not a PhD, I do play one on TV, right? So no, I think those are the things as the HR community we're going to need to prepare for more and more. And when you go back to the presentation, when you see it, and even part of the commentary on that CBS Sunday morning interview was not just about, of course, they weren't even talking about interviewing candidates, is about what is the bias that's now created when you have the ability to see into someone's home life. And so as recruiters, as someone doing that video interview, you're going to really have to block out what some of those things are behind the scenes and not use that as a part of your judgment. So one of the things that they found from a bias standpoint was even high school kids. So when you had all these Zoom classes that started a couple of weeks ago, it really became evident more so than ever before, the class differentiation between the poor students and the wealthy students. And it really was quite disturbing to some of those kids overall, because they had no idea that their best friend or their good friend in school was living in these type of conditions at home. And so I think that as we continue to do video interviewing, we're going to have to really maintain a level of professionalism, of being unbiased and not making decisions based on what we see behind that candidate and what we get from that candidate's experience and qualifications and competencies, which are the most important things anyway. But I do believe that as we begin to have this work-life blend that we're already now in, that making sure that you don't have those biases is going to be extremely important.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think another thing that's important to note is that also the disruption that can happen during interview. And I'm not talking on the candidate side, I'm talking on the actual interviewer side. So whether it's a recruiter doing an early screen or the hiring manager, we know, and I think this will hold true in virtual interviewing versus even in person, is that the number one negative reason in North America in our research of why candidates withdraw themselves from the recruiting process is because of time being disrespected during interviews and appointments. So I think it's really important for everybody on this call, right, Darren, to understand that is to ensure to coach your hiring managers too, that they shouldn't be checking their email when they're doing a video interview, and they shouldn't be on their phones, right? And as much as they can, because that kind of disruption feeling, that makes the candidate feel like you're not there for me right now, right? What else would you say about that?
I think you're spot on. So just as an example, I've got my phone in my hand now. If I look down, it's obvious, right? Yeah. If I'm texting, it's obvious. And so you really have to set it aside, quite honestly, and you have to actually focus as if they were sitting right in front of you. And don't make those mistakes that you've been able to multitask kind of behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. You know, when there wasn't video involved, well, now you're out there, and your entire interaction and maybe even the entire employment brand of your organization is now going to be reflective on how you conduct that interview. So We've coached recruiters, and this is a lot of HR folks on this call, right? So we have to take a lot of this back, not only have these expectation sheets set up for the candidates, but also, to your point, the hiring managers, so they kind of think through, you know, what's the most appropriate way to get the information, document the information, and have a really rich conversation with those candidates to make the best decision possible.
Because it's kind of a very subtle thing, but some of us that aren't comfortable or familiar or haven't done a lot of video talks like we're doing now, or being forced to do, is that looking down at you wherever your picture is you have to kind of force yourself to continue to look at the webcam, to look at the camera, because then it looks like I'm looking at you as if we were in person together. And that's hard because I see you down here, but I'm looking at the camera, right? To give you that feel like we actually are looking at each other. So it's a subtle thing and it takes time, but I think it's important in a world where we're going to be doing a lot of these for a while to come still. So
yeah, absolutely.
What else we got, Ron?
Yes, no, thank you guys. Darren, a question came in regarding something. It said you had mentioned 100+ recruiters across the country. I don't know if one of your points. They were asking, have you seen the number of interviews drop over the last month of the pandemic?
Yeah, so good question. We have seen some variance between the number of interviews that we were doing, call it a month and a half ago even. So a lot of customers just didn't know what to do. We didn't see that really occur to the very end of March, to be quite honest with you. So it was kind of steady all the way to the very end, and then everybody said, let's pause and let's wait. And then at the same time, we had another whole set of customers decide that they're essential, and if one individual is out or comes in and tested positive for the COVID, they've got to quarantine another subset of employees in that group. So they've got to go in and bring in reinforcements or bring in other workers to take up some of that work, especially in the production world and some retail customers that we have. So we've definitely seen a drop, though, on the professional recruiting, as we've seen kind of a pause in a lot of hiring across the U.S.
Yep, I think that's true. And even in the short, brief surveys we've been doing on the side since the beginning of March, we're seeing that definitely there is a reduction in hiring or a freeze, but there's still almost a quarter of the companies that have participated in our brief side surveys that say they're still hiring. Obviously essential workers, obviously healthcare, logistics, supply chain, other industries that are even doing, pockets of surge hiring, right? Because they have to right now as well.
Yeah. And the other thing, Kevin, I've noticed too, just in the last couple of weeks, is that had a lot of really interesting conversations with some CHROs around, hey, maybe now is the time for us to top grade and be strategic about who we want out there, because we've got some recruiters. We don't want to have anything change with their work life. So let's think about how can we strategically go now, pick some talent that might not have been looking before, but are maybe going to consider something now.
That's true.
And while they might be afraid, there's another segment that's afraid to move right now. There's still a segment that might be interested in doing that. So we're even seeing some conversation begin to happen now around strategic hiring, around what the new normal is going to look like, and having someone on their team that's a little bit more agile than they would have been in the past and more strategic in their approach. So we're hearing that as well.
Agreed. Yeah. Ron, do we have another question?
Yeah, we have a couple more questions. Questions just keep coming in. So someone was asking what the most effective amount of time for a video interview is. Maybe if that's different than a in-person, or what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I've got a couple of thoughts on it. The most effective amount of time is the time you need to make a great decision, number one. And then secondly, you've got to consider, that everybody is used to TikTok and Instagram, and the attention span, is really not quite what it used to be, and especially when you're doing something new, like a video interview. So I think that if you can focus on, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, for an entry-level type of roles, maybe even less, but you might want to do 2 sets of interviews as well. So again, you've got to really think about your candidates and the role that you're doing. So you may have a recruiter interview that's shorter and a hiring manager interview a little bit longer, but I just think it's really difficult to have an hour-long interview like we might do in person, where you also interject a tour or you interject some meet and greets and some things like that you just don't have anymore. So just be thoughtful about the amount of time that you're going to spend. I don't think we know what the optimal amount of time is yet, but I would just say it's shorter than what you think.
Sure, and I agree with you on that. And it's also, contingent on what you're evaluating for too, right? I mean, if you have hopefully more of a structured process to try to keep it similar with every candidate for every job type that you're interviewing for. I mean, maybe like you just said, for hourly workers, it might, depending on the job, it might be 15, 20 minutes. And for more professional hires, it might be 30 to 60 minutes. It's going to depend on, again, of what your criteria of evaluation is, right?
Yep, exactly.
What else, Ron?
Thank you, guys. Another question came in was, have you noticed a difference in retention rates of candidates who have received a face-to-face interview versus those who have received a video virtual interview? I didn't butcher that too bad.
I think that's a little early to tell that yet, right?
It is. Yeah, it's a great question. And just making a note on the side, too, we're going to start tracking it because I think it's a good idea. If there's any way to kind of balance that between, pre-COVID, post-COVID, that's going to be kind of the tough differentiator, because the situation, again, in the whole world has changed around stability of the role, stability of the job, how many layoffs were in this sector versus another sector. So I do think that once we kind of get to a new normal, it'll absolutely be a good way to kind of track that. If I go back 10 years, okay, when we were doing video interviews and recorded interviews earlier, there was really no significant difference in the retention of the ones that were done strictly by video and ones that were not. So I would think that would continue to carry forward. But I think the labor market dynamics have certainly changed, in the last 10 years. It makes that a little bit hard to compare, 7.5%, 6.5%, 8.5% unemployment to where we were at, 3.7 to 4 to now 22 or whatever it is this week. So I think they're really hard to make those comparisons, but it absolutely should be something we should track.
Yeah, agreed. That's why it's going to be fascinating to see what kind of benchmarks we get this year in our candidate experience research, Darren, because for 9 years we were measuring it in a growth market. I mean, that was the reality. And it was great. Almost monthly, month after month job growth that we saw. And obviously we all know it's a different world now and will be for a few years to come. But it'll be interesting to see how that compares, since there's going to be much higher influx of video interviewing that we're going to see in our data than ever before. So
yeah, for sure.
Do we have any other questions, Ron?
Yeah, we do. So we have 2 more questions, and then just some great comments that I'll read at the end when we get your guys' last thoughts. But another question, great question for you guys both. But what tips can you share with recruiters to keep candidates engaged during a period where hiring has been paused or slowed down?
Go ahead, Darren.
Yeah, I'll give it a shot, and then you can absolutely join in. I think sharing content is critical. I think that was true before the COVID, and it's still true today. The more content about your organization and what you're doing is going to just help educate that candidate about who you are and your culture. It's a great key form strategy as well. And then the transparency around, hey, we're not going to hire this month. Just going to take, but we are really interested in you. I'm going to be sharing things with you over the next several months. So creating expectations around how you share and why you're sharing that content, and then also being open and free to respond back and forth. So, hey, text me in a week or two when you have a question, or let's touch base on this date. So you got a specific follow-up date with those candidates, so they're not just out there wondering what's going to happen and when it's going to happen. Now, that takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of pre-planning. It takes a lot of calendar work on your part as a recruiter, because you're still doing other things as well. But outlining that critical talent is also really important. But the content share, I think, is the most important piece. Kevin, you may have another idea.
I underscore all of that. I think we've had other conversations with organizations of like, should we be doing that or not? And I think, I mean, this is such an overwhelming time, right? I mean, there's so much devastation happening, not only on the healthcare side, of course, with lives being lost and people getting sick, but also economically, businesses that are shuttering, people being laid off or furloughed. But I think that now is the time that not to just not say anything. You have to let any candidates know. If you're completely frozen hiring, then be clear about that. We're not hiring right now, as you said. Hopefully in a few months we will be, but in the meantime, I'd like to stay in touch. And whether you ever had a talent community before or not, maybe this is the time to start nurturing those folks. It doesn't mean they're going to wait around, because there's a lot of people looking for work right now. But
Yep.
You have to have that conversation, because until you're ready to make, and you can't, and this is another one that's a hard one too. Like, are you planning ahead for what that recruiting and hiring looks like? You should be, but it's going to be multiple scenarios. This is where scenario planning comes into play, right? We have never seen this before. We can't really model this. We don't have the data for this, but so you're going to have to plan, right, Darren, for multiple contingencies. What happens if if it's 2 or 3 months from now, I can start hiring back, especially if you've got any in-person business, right? Or is it 6 months? And what does that look like? I mean, you've got to start planning those out, and that's not easy for any of us, for that matter.
It's definitely uncharted territory.
Yeah. What else, Ron?
Thank you, guys. Next question was asking, what are the best type of video interviewing tools being used currently? That's a hot question.
That's a loaded one, Darren.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. And so I think the best ones to use are the ones you're the most comfortable with. How's that for a safe answer?
That's a good safe answer. You're being agnostic. Good for you. Good.
I'm trying to remain. We use a lot of different ones. So I don't know that there's one that kind of stands out above the others. A lot of it has to do with your technology. A lot of it has to do with how much time you want to spend, how many people you need to get on the panel interview, and things like that. So my recommendation is to research maybe the top 3 or 4. You've always got Skype, right, that you can fall back on, and it works.
Well, you have the free, the free.
Yeah, you got the free ones that are there, and don't hesitate to look at some of those as well, and don't discount them before you try them out.
Right, exactly.
Try them out on your family first, where it's not business, and see how well your mom gets on it, and that'll tell you how.
And I'll be kind of agnostic, but I'll say go to the talentboard.org site and look at our sponsors list, and you can check out some of the companies that are engaged to excel being one of them as well. But some of the video players are in our community as well, so just check that out. What else, Ron?
Plug works perfect. I like it.
There you go.
Great job, guys. Thank you. We got one more question for you guys.
Okay.
And so it was asking any recommendations on encouraging hiring managers to utilize video interviewing who may be hesitant.
I think the education is what's most important. Them understanding the necessity, number one, the fact that, the criticality of getting the top talent in sooner than later is also going to be important for those that need to do it now. So this isn't any change from a change management standpoint. You want to think about your stakeholders that you have. You want to go find the ones that are generally early adopters. Get a hold of those hiring managers first, experiment, try with them, walk them through it, partner with them, and then you can spread it out to the rest of the organization as you would any kind of change you would do, in the world that we live in today. That'd be my first recommendation to do, is just find the ones that are really ready to make a change, or more adaptable to make a change, and you go with them first.
And you help them even do some trainings with them, and have them help maybe record some trainings with them that you can then leverage across the organization and share with other hiring managers. Because, if you have hiring managers that are doing continuous hiring, that are going to be more open and more progressive in that sense of like adopting new tools and resources, it's going to be a little bit harder sometimes, I think, with hiring managers that hire maybe once or twice a year, right? And
Right.
sometimes you're going to run into that. But I think I agree with you. And I think you get some trainings in place, and help have the hiring managers that adopt quickly help you train.
Yeah. Use the content. Feel free to use any kind of content we send you from this today as even an icebreaker. And one of the reasons I kind of pivoted and didn't use any kind of stock, I used as little stock photography as I could, is because I wanted to make it as real and relevant as it is. So you can use Big Bird as a great example of what the white background looks like, and then you can use Bernie Sanders as a good example, or Tom Hanks. Kind of make it real and bring it to life with them, so they understand what it's going to be like.
Right. Exactly. What else, Ron?
Well, if you guys have time, we did have one more question that came in.
Let's do one more question. Let's do it.
Sounds good. Just asking if you think that video interview will have an impact on the quality of hiring. And you guys kind of touched on this, but want to get your thoughts on that.
What do you think, Darren?
Well, absolutely. I think every kind of interviewing you do has an impact on the quality of hire. Okay, so that sounds kind of like a high level, view of it, but I absolutely believe it will. And as you get better at video interviewing, you're going to be able to make better hiring decisions. And again, at the end of the day, you have to remember that the focus of an interview is to vet out a candidate's experience, skills, and competencies, so you can make a really good match for the roles that you're recruiting for. And as you get better at video interviewing, you get better at making those decisions. And you may find a bumpy road at first, but I think we'll all get there as we continue to do more and more videos down the road. But I think overall, as a generality, no, it's not going to impact the quality negative or positively until, when you get ready to do it correctly and you focus on it and have positive intent as you go into it. Right.
Especially if you've got other kinds of screening tests or assessments that you employ, that you're still going to be definitely want to continue to leverage, whether you're an in-person, a phone screen, or a video interview or screen. It's still, again, the process of how you hire and how you screen overall with those things, and how you evaluate somebody for the role that you're hiring for. And it's a, for some of you, it's a new way to do it, to learn to do it, and the nuance of it. But I think it's obviously now's the time to become a full champion and adopter, because you're going to be doing this for a while. So
yeah, just for the short term, for sure. We don't need 3 days.
Right, I know, exactly. What else? Anything else, Ron?
So that was all the questions. Super appreciate it. There was one great comment that was in here that was something I was actually thinking of during your presentation, Darren. But it was, someone was saying that their friend was using googly eyes, and they have them next to their camera on their computer, so that they remember to look at the camera during presentations. And I was even thinking you could cut out like a little picture of your dog or something, or something. Maybe if you have a laptop, put it next to the camera on your laptop.
That's a great idea.
I thought that was a great leaving comment, and a lot of kudos for you guys as well from people. So great job, great presentation.
Well, Darren, thank you so much, and Ron, thanks for your help, and thanks everybody for attending today. And we'll do this again soon. Thank you.
I'm good. Glad to be here. Thanks for your time.
Bye, everybody.